So let me spell it out. We will not raise income tax. We will not raise national insurance. There is a budget coming in October, and it's going to be painful. We have no other choice, given the situation that we're in.
He attended 21 sentencing council meetings that watered down punishments. That's why they call him the softie. Soft on crime, soft on criminals.
Labour voters are waking up to the reality of Sir Keir Starmer and co, saying one thing before the election and doing something completely different now they're in power.
Remember those shiny pre-election promises from Sir Keir Starmer? You know, the ones where he told the British public he'd usher in a new era of fairness, prosperity and transparency. Well, it turns out that those promises were about as solid as a wet paper towel. The British people are catching on to Starmer's grand U-turns, broken promises and political games, and they're not happy about it. Starmer's Labour Party ran a campaign that sounded like it had all the answers. But as the dust settles and real policies are needed, it seems like he's forgotten what he even promised. And the British public, well, they're left holding the bag. Let's break down how Starmer has dropped the ball on several key issues and why this might just spell doom for his political ambitions.
So let me spell it out. We will not raise income tax. We will not raise national insurance. We will not raise VAT. That is a manifesto commitment.
Starmer's pre-election promises about the economy had a familiar ring of commitment to making Britain fairer by reversing austerity and investing in public services. At least, that was his manifesto pledge. The core of his campaign promised not to raise taxes and bring better economic policies. He was going to freeze the taxes, help the poor, and boost small businesses. Sounds great on paper, right? However, that couldn't be further from the truth. Fast forward to today, and Starmer announces his dreadful betrayal.
There is a budget coming in October, and it's going to be painful. We have no other choice, given the situation that we're in. Those with the broadest shoulders should bear the heavier burden. I'll have to turn to the country and make big asks of you as well, to accept short-term pain for long-term good, the difficult trade-off for the genuine solution.
Labour's economic policy looks like it's been ripped straight out of a Marxist handbook, except with a few missing pages. Tax hikes on everything under the sun, from pensions to businesses, have left the public asking, where's the fairness? Even better, Starmer's sudden U-turn has left many wondering if he even remembers his own manifesto. Those with the broader shoulders, meaning the working class, will be punished till their shoulders break. It's like he's punishing people for trusting him. Let's not forget how he's trying to crush the pensioners after bashing the previous government for the same thing.
But pensioners and those who are planning their retirement deserve better than his contempt for their questions. Because if £46 billion were cut from its funding, the value of the state pension would almost halve. So I don't apologise for asking on their behalf again whether he will finally rule out cutting their state pension to fulfil the enormous black hole in his spending plans.
That's quite the scathing speech, Sir Keir. Too bad you're doing the exact same thing. Pensioners in particular are feeling the burn. After promising to protect the triple lock on pensions, Starmer has now backtracked, leaving millions of elderly citizens in a state of uncertainty. Maybe he missed the memo, but pensions aren't exactly the best thing to gamble with politically. And let's not forget his stance on business. Small businesses, which were promised relief from crippling taxes, are now facing increased burdens as Starmer attempts to plug the gaps in his failing economic plan. Starmer's idea of helping us seems to be taxing us into bankruptcy.
Goal 1. The next Labour government will deliver an NHS that is there when you need it. Ambulances, 7 minutes for cardiac arrest. A&E back to the 4-hour target. GPs, the highest satisfaction levels on record. Waiting lists down. Planned treatment within 18 weeks. No backsliding, no excuses. We will meet these standards again. We will get the NHS back on its feet. Goal 2. We will improve healthy life expectancy for all.
Ah, the NHS, the one issue every politician claims they'll fix. Starmer was no different. His grand promises to fund the NHS properly and put it back on its feet seemed like a surefire way to win votes. Yet, here we are post-election, and the NHS is still struggling under immense pressure. Not only has Starmer failed to inject the promised cash into the system, but now the Labour leader is backtracking on commitments to reduce waiting times and improve services.
When Keir Starmer says he'll resolve it, he hasn't explained to you how. But I will say this:
you could answer that, Keir Starmer.
Well, we wouldn't pay the 35%. We've already said that to the doctors. We can't afford it because the government's already broken the economy, and there are many things that now can't be afforded. So we're not going to pay that. But what you can't do is what the Prime Minister has done, which is to
Well, you just said you'd resolve it, so what would you do?
At the end of the day...
So you're not going to give them the 35% pay rise that they're asking for, so how would you resolve it?
Look,
just standing there and saying, I'll resolve it, isn't an answer. That's not a plan.
It's almost as if his promises were just vague ideas rather than actual policies. In fact, Starmer's decision to focus more on long-term solutions, which sounds suspiciously like kicking the can down the road, has left patients and NHS staff alike wondering if he'll ever get around to doing anything substantial. One thing is for sure, under Starmer's leadership, the NHS is still in critical condition. What's worse is his blatant lie. He said he won't give the pay rise, but guess what he did the moment he gained power? Starmer granted the pay rise to the unions, at the cost of scrapping the winter fuel payments for pensioners. Here are the grandiose words Starmer had to say.
People, you've got off to a bad start with pensioners who voted for you, and then you cut their winter fuel allowance, and it wasn't in your manifesto. You also said in the general election you had no plans to raise taxes beyond what you'd set out in your manifesto. Now you're saying something else. So can you please level with people?
It's clear that he lied in his manifesto. The promise was that the Labour government will not raise any taxes and will support the pensioners. Starmer's pre-election promises regarding winter fuel payments for pensioners have come crashing down. In a country where winters can be particularly brutal, the promise of increased support for heating bills was music to the ears of millions of pensioners. But, as with most of his promises, this one has been quietly shelved. In fact, he bashed the previous government over this. The supposed champion of the pensioners had this to say.
This year, he went on Good Morning Britain and said Labour would save you 400 quid on your bills. In June this year, he said again that Labour would cut bills, create jobs and provide energy security. In Parliament, he hammered the Tories for even thinking about cutting the winter fuel payments for pensioners.
Last year, the Prime Minister was apparently drawing up plans to remove the winter fuel allowance from pensioners. So will he now rule out taking pensioners' winter fuel payments off them to help fund his £46 billion black hole?
Then people voted for him, he won the election, and this happens. He cuts winter fuel payments for the elderly. They now face, many of them, a choice between heating and eating.
Starmer pledged to protect the elderly from the rising costs of living, particularly by boosting winter fuel payments. Yet, here we are with fuel prices skyrocketing and pensioners left out in the cold, literally. Instead of keeping his word, Starmer seems to have shifted focus to backtracking, leaving many of the UK's most vulnerable to wonder how they'll make it through the winter months. The hypocrisy is disgusting to say the least. Not only did he have no plan to fix the issues, he's actively making it worse by going back on every promise he made. Now, he's rightfully being grilled in the Parliament.
It was his decision, and his decision alone, to award a train driver on £65,000 a pay rise of almost £10,000. And it was also his decision that a pensioner living on just £13,000 will have their winter fuel allowance removed. So can the Prime Minister explain to Britain's low-income pensioners why he has taken money away from them whilst at the same time given more money to highly paid train drivers?
What's worse is that this broken promise isn't just a political failure, it's a moral one. Pensioners, many of whom have paid into the system for decades, were counting on that extra help. The irony is that Starmer's Labour Party, which claims to be the party of the working class and the elderly, has left both groups to fend for themselves while talking up vague promises of future prosperity. Instead, he's pandering to the unions and granting them huge pay increases, another thing he promised not to do. This has led to immense consequences. Seniors are suffering, and this is just the start. Watch how this MP exposes the reality of the matter.
But the fact that it's not in their manifesto means that actually the Labour government have no mandate to do this, Kev. No mandate whatsoever. It's almost kind of, it's definitely a matter of electoral fraud, I would say, is that if you get elected without saying that you're going to do something so monumental, and then within 9 or 10 weeks you do this and affect 10 million pensioners.
Exactly. Nobody would have voted for him if they knew the evil schemes he was cooking up. This is quite literally electoral fraud. He promised one thing, didn't mention his plans anywhere, and then did the unthinkable. No wonder his approval ratings are plummeting as a direct result of his ridiculous betrayal. It'd be one thing if he was peddling bad policies, it's much worse when he's lying about it to gain support.
Mr. Speaker, for the last 18 years, Norman has been a full-time carer for his wife, Ros, who has MS and Alzheimer's disease. Early this year, he was forced to go back to work to earn the extra money for the cost of caring for his wife. As their income is just a few £100s above the limit for pension credit, they're set to lose their winter fuel allowance.
This is just one of many examples. That poor senior worked his entire life to support this nation, and now he's being forced to work again. Perhaps in Starmer's world, pensioners should just toughen up and deal with it, but for the rest of the UK, it's an example of how out of touch his government has become. With temperatures dropping and energy bills soaring, it's safe to say the British public won't be forgetting this failure anytime soon. One other thing the public won't forget is Starmer's love for criminals.
I won't stand for record levels of knife crime that we have in this country today, and I won't stand for 9 out of 10 crimes going unsolved.
He's standing for it all right. Another false promise, he talks a great deal, but it's just that, all talk. We've seen no action so far and the situation is worsening. Knife crime keeps surging. What has Starmer done except offer empty platitudes and non-existent solutions? Nothing. Well, to be fair, he has made the situation worse by releasing prisoners early. So not only is he unable to take action, when he does take action, the incompetence shines through. This shouldn't be surprising though. Starmer's record as a prosecutor is proof that he's soft on crime and utterly incompetent. Sure, he made a false promise, but maybe we're the real fools to trust those promises.
Say is that the last person I'd go to for advice on this is Keir Starmer.
Why?
Because when he was Director of Public Prosecutions, I mean, his performance was woeful. I mean, if you saw the rape convictions, for example, that's one of the big things people are concerned about these days. Under Keir Starmer, he had to apologise for them after a bad inspection report. So, I mean, I wouldn't put a lot of trust in him to do it.
There you have it, folks. The truth was before our eyes all this time. He said he won't stand for crime, but he's bending the knee to criminals instead. During the campaign, Starmer promised to take a tough stance on law and order. Yet, his post-election policies suggest that he's more interested in understanding criminals than actually punishing them.
And in contrast to the last Labour scheme, prisoners were let out with no supervision, no electronic tags. In fact, 80,000 offenders were let out, 16,000 were violent, Mr. Speaker, leading to multiple murders committed. We fixed that system. But when it comes to this question, not only are we building the biggest prison programme in history, we're also deploying rapid deployment cells. And, Mr. Speaker, because on this side of the House, we understand the importance of prison. Unlike one of his frontbenchers who said, and I said, who quote, "Prison doesn't prevent crime."
Starmer's Justice Secretary even suggested that releasing prisoners early would help alleviate overcrowding. Not exactly the tough-on-crime approach that voters were expecting. It's as if Starmer thinks being soft will solve the UK's crime problems. It won't.
Since 2010, crime down by 50% under the Conservative government, Mr. Speaker. 20,000 more police officers, we've given them more powers, and we've toughened up sentencing, all opposed by Sir Softy over there. He attended 21 sentencing council meetings that watered down punishments. That's why they call him Sir Softy. Soft on crime, soft on criminals.
Sir Softy is the perfect name for Starmer and his policies. Let's see what he's done so far. Firstly, he let people out of prison early. Secondly, he has done nothing to solve rising crime rates in the country. And thirdly, he has always argued against tougher punishment for criminals. While knife crime rises and public safety diminishes, Starmer seems more focused on social justice initiatives than making sure criminals stay behind bars. And voters are starting to take notice. Even if the voters forgive this disaster, they won't forgive the lies he told everyone about the immigration crisis.
We've got record numbers coming. The promises he makes are not worth the paper they're written on. His plan is failing. We do have to deal with this problem, Stephen. We absolutely have to deal with it. We have to smash the gangs that are doing. I will never accept that the only criminal gangs that can't be taken down are these vile gangs. I've taken down terrorist gangs in my past. I've seen how it's done. I know it can be done. We'll have a border security command if I'm Prime Minister, and we will get that done and stop this vile trade and those boats coming over with very vulnerable people.
Thank you very much.
One of Keir Starmer's biggest pre-election promises was to bring a fair and humane approach to immigration. He pledged to streamline the process, reduce illegal immigration, and ensure Britain's borders were safe and secure. Fast forward to today, and the only thing streamlined about Starmer's immigration policies is the public's increasing frustration with them.
Speaker, the honourable gentleman has been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. He described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration. And he has never, ever voted for tougher asylum laws. It is clear, Mr. Speaker, while he's in hock to the open border activists, we're on the side of the British people.
Despite claiming to be tough on immigration, Starmer's approach has been anything but. The UK is facing record levels of illegal crossings across the English Channel, with nearly 46,000 migrants arriving via small boats in 2022 alone. And what's Starmer doing? Proposing compassionate solutions that seem more like a free pass than anything resembling border security, while the British public is increasingly concerned about the strain illegal immigration puts on public services, housing and social welfare.
Actually, when I was in Dover yesterday talking to our law enforcement officials, what did they tell me? Precisely because of the law that the Conservative government passed last year, they have now been able to arrest more than double the number of people they did before. 397 in the last 6 months. But stopping the boats, Mr. Speaker, stopping the boats is not just my priority, it is the people's priority. But his position on this is clear. He wanted to, in his words, scrap the Rwanda deal. He voted against measures to deport foreign criminals, Mr. Speaker, and he even argued against deportation flights. Well, and we know why, because on this matter, he talked about his legal background. He's just another lefty lawyer standing in our way.
Let's not forget his now infamous U-turn on the Labour manifesto's position regarding free movement post-Brexit. First, he was all in favour of ending it. Then, out of nowhere, he hinted at potentially revisiting the idea of aligning more closely with EU immigration laws. For a leader who campaigned on taking control of the UK's immigration system, this zigzagging has left the British public feeling as though Starmer's policies change with the wind. As for his border security plan, it's all just fake hype over pre-existing initiatives.
The £75 million that he says he's going to save from that, he's going to put into creating a border security command. Well, I'd like to know what's so different between that, what the difference is between that and the small boats command. Nothing. This is all words. That's my fear. And when he talks about the end of his piece there that you just played, he talked about enhancing border security. I'm sorry, but we've got to start separating asylum policy and immigration policy.
His magical plan already exists, and it doesn't work. Why? Because Starmer is more concerned with pandering than actually being strict enough to deport the illegal immigrants. With crime rates linked to illegal immigration on the rise and many British citizens struggling to get by, it's no wonder the public is fed up. Voters expected more decisive action from Starmer, but instead, they got ambiguity and excuses. The people who voted for tighter immigration controls are now asking if Starmer was ever serious about protecting British borders, or if it was just another campaign soundbite.
Keir Starmer, who made a series of promises when he stood to be leader of the Labour Party, or pledges as he called them, and not only broke them, but in some cases claimed he'd never made them.
Is it a pledge that these industries will be in your manifesto for nationalisation?
Yes, it is. I didn't make a commitment to nationalisation. I never made a commitment to nationalisation.
Some of those lies were just petty.
I want to pay tribute to Jeremy Corbyn. He's a colleague, he's a friend.
Was he a friend?
No.
At the end of the day, Keir Starmer has made one thing crystal clear: he's great at making promises, but terrible at keeping them. Whether it's the economy, immigration, or law and order, Starmer's track record is one of U-turns and half-baked ideas.
Let's go back to what you alluded to earlier. There's a new poll out which has been carried out by the More in Common organisation, revealing that Sir Keir Starmer's approval rating has plunged to a record low of -16, a drop of 27 points from his post-election high of +11. I mean, he has plunged a long way in a very short space of time, and as I was discussing with Isabel Oakeshott earlier, it's almost as if he's trying to alienate vast swathes of the public.
It's no wonder the British public is losing faith in Labour. Starmer might be trying to play the part of a competent leader, but his broken promises have exposed the reality he's simply not up to the job. And as the next election looms, voters will likely remember all those promises that were made and promptly broken. As for Starmer, maybe next time he should invest in a better memory for all the things he said he'd do. Or better yet, keep his promises simple. I promise to do absolutely nothing. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Unlike Starmer, we always deliver on our promises to keep you informed.